on a cruise has changed quite a bit since 2020, and there's been changes, reversals, updates, and new policies all along the way. So, as we're leaving 2022, going into 2023, what is it like to go on a cruise, and how back to normal is a Royal Caribbean cruise? I've got a breakdown up next. Hey everyone, it's Matt from RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com, and as I'm sure everybody remembers, back in March of 2020, the cruise industry, including Royal Caribbean, shut down for well over a year, almost into 2 years, and really the full restart of the fleet took pretty much 2 years, if not longer. In fact, Royal Caribbean, I think, did pretty well compared to other lines in terms of getting its ships back sooner, but it was a long shutdown. And whether you went on a cruise in 2021, you got on a cruise this year in 2022, or perhaps your first sailing back will be in 2023. Well, the policies have changed quite a bit. In fact, trying to match it all and track it all has been a challenge for almost anybody, including myself. I mean, there's been a lot of changes. And so if you're looking to go on a cruise soon, you might be wondering what those policies look like and how back to normal, quote unquote, is Royal Caribbean. When we say back to normal, what I'm talking about is really how close is the cruise experience today to what it was in 2019 before COVID-19. Now, the policies have changed quite a bit. And the good news is many of the policies that were in effect in either 2021 or even here in 2022 have really gone to the wayside. Royal Caribbean has made it a concerted effort to really move past the pandemic and get things back more in line with really other forms of leisure travel. Royal Caribbean has said time and time again, they want their vacation experience to be no different than if you go to another type of leisure travel vacation, whether it is a theme park, a hotel, a casino on land, something on land, to be similar to what you're experiencing on a cruise ship. It's important to note that while things have progressed quite a bit, especially over the last 6 months, I do need to caution everybody watching this video that the protocols and policies I'm talking about can be region-specific and, more importantly, can change at any time. In fact, I struggled with actually deciding to make this video or not because the protocols change so often, and somebody watching this video certainly months from now may find some of the information out of date. So, if you're going on a Royal Caribbean cruise and you're watching this video more than even a day or two after it comes out, it might be worthwhile to double check the protocols for where you're sailing from at the current time. It changes all the time, so I want to caution everybody about that. But I know there's a lot of people who check in periodically to see what's going on with the cruise industry, so I think there's value in talking about where things are because things have got a whole lot better. Let's start off with some of the COVID protocols before the cruise, the requirements in order to sail, because at one point you needed to do a COVID test, you needed to be vaccinated, and some other things along the way. The good news is a lot of that has changed. Pre-cruise testing is no longer required to sail, with a few exceptions. At this time, the only sailings that have pre-cruise testing requirements are cruises from the U.S. and the Caribbean that visit Colombia, the country in South America, transatlantic cruises, and cruises from Australia. That's it. So if your cruise leaves from the United States and goes anywhere that does not include Colombia, there's no pre-cruise testing required at all. The only pre-cruise testing required at this point is if your cruise visits Colombia, in which case guests 18 and up who are not fully vaccinated will need to do a negative PCR test within 3 days of the cruise. If you're doing a transatlantic cruise, which is pretty much over until the spring, but anyway, guests 5 and older must bring a negative COVID test taken within 2 days of boarding day. And then if you're from Australia, all guests 2 and above, regardless of vaccination status, must provide a negative test result for COVID-19 with a PCR test taken within 2 days before boarding day, or a self-administered rapid antigen test within 1 day before boarding for any sailing of any length. That's for Australia only. And in terms of being vaccinated or not, really, there's even fewer requirements for that. Pretty much at this point, COVID vaccination is no longer required, with a few exceptions. At this time, the only sailings that have COVID-19 vaccination requirements are cruises from Australia and transatlantic sailings from Europe. That's it. Every other cruise, not required at this time. And if I had to guess, not that I'm a public health expert at all, and I'm usually wrong about predictions, I really don't see them coming back at all. Similarly, you're not going to have to wear a face mask anywhere on the cruise ship, and there are no vaccinated zones, but the face masks and the vaccinated only zones, those are policies that really have been gone since about early 2022. If you're wondering how full your Royal Caribbean cruise ship is going to be, well, you should expect it to be completely full. Other than some markets that were a little depressed because of just lack of demand, like Europe was due to the Ukraine-Russia war, pretty much cruise ships are sailing full capacity these days, especially in North America. So you should expect your cruise ship to be sailing at full capacity. Earlier on in the restart, cruise ships were sailing at reduced capacity in order to foster social distancing, but that's pretty much gone at this point. Ship capacity is back to 100%, and that's pretty much it. Another good change Royal Caribbean made as a result of COVID-19 is the way they ventilate and circulate the air on board its cruise ships. The HVAC system and its multiple layers of filters and other features make it virtually impossible for aerosol particles, like those from a cough, to pass between spaces. And that's certified, by the way, by an independent assessment conducted on a Royal Caribbean cruise ship, thanks to a team of scientists from the University of Nebraska Medical Center and the National Strategic Research Institute. You should pretty much expect the cruise ship activities to be pretty much back to normal. Initially, there was a lot of social distancing on board the ship. There were spaced out seating in restaurants. You weren't able to sit with other people in my time dining, and shore excursions were limited, and a variety of other factors. But at this point, pretty much all the protocols for that have been removed. So whether we're talking about going to a bar, going on a tour, eating in a restaurant, those protocols have been removed, and it's pretty much like it was in 2019. And really, one of the last things to come back were some of the specific activities like cooking demonstrations and other onboard activities, and that's all back, whether it is karaoke, whether it is the sushi making class, whether it is even the quest, that is coming back to cruise ships around the fleet, backstage tours, those are all back, and now you'll be able to enjoy them when you go on your cruise. And arguably, most importantly, the cruise ship self-service buffet is back. Actually, that came back quite a while ago, in fact, at this point. But in a situation in which the buffet might have been gone or changed or anything, it's back to the way it was. You can serve yourself. For quite a while, crew members were serving guests, but now you're able to serve yourself, and that's pretty much the same thing. The crew members are still sanitizing tables and chairs between meals, although, cleaning tables and chairs is always something they were doing before that. But you don't have to worry too much about it being any really different than it was in 2019 to what it is today, whether you're in the Windjammer or other self-service venues. One major change that came about as a result of COVID-19, or at least at the time of COVID-19, was the change of the muster drill. There's no longer a muster drill in the sense that you go to your muster station, if you remember that one. This is, of course, the lifeboat drill, which is mandatory. Before COVID-19, you'd be gathered in a large group, crammed into a public space, take part in a safety drill that mimics a nautical emergency. But since COVID, Royal Caribbean went to something called e-muster, which allows the drill to take place with safe social distancing via the Royal Caribbean app. Now, forgetting the need for social distancing for a moment, this is just a better overall experience because passengers watch the muster drill and listen to the emergency signal on their mobile device using the Royal Caribbean app or in their stateroom television. Then all they have to do is report to the muster station at some point before sail away in order to confirm they know where that is. That's it. This is so much easier and such a better change. So while I think a lot of people are very happy to see the protocols going away from COVID-19, I will say this particular one for e-muster is one that I hope never goes away. Speaking of the Royal Caribbean app, using the Royal Caribbean app now is way more important than it was before COVID-19. The Royal Caribbean app is not new since COVID, but its importance and its use has been greatly expanded. Before COVID-19, you really would use the Royal Caribbean app as kind of a nice thing to do. It wasn't quite as ingrained in the cruise experience as it is today. Nowadays, the entire process can be really managed via the Royal Caribbean app, and Royal Caribbean really pushes that. Whether you're talking about the online check-in process before the cruise, or you're talking about managing the activities on board, the app is an essential download. Speaking of the Cruise Compass, there is still a paper Cruise Compass available, but by default, you probably won't be getting it. Royal Caribbean has shifted over to an e-compass in which you can either view the activities via the Royal Caribbean app or get a PDF download every day on your device of the current Cruise Compass. It looks exactly like the Cruise Compass, but it's a PDF download. Now, this change doesn't have to do with COVID per se. This is just about saving paper and not using as much waste, certainly. But this is a change that is out there and has nothing, again, to do with COVID necessarily, but something that has changed since 2019. Let's talk about crew members for a second because the experience there has changed a little bit. When Royal Caribbean restarted cruising in 2021, crew members were wearing masks, and they've been wearing masks actually much longer than the guests have. But in October of 2022, Royal Caribbean began relaxing that policy, and now it's really up to the crew members if they want to wear their masks or not. In fact, these days, I would say most crew members are not wearing masks. Some still do. It's their choice if they'd like to or not. But another change is, and when it comes to the crew members, is you're much more likely now to see their smiling face instead of a mask, which is great to see, and it's up to the crew member, just like the guests, if they wish to wear a mask or not. Now let's talk about some of the changes beyond the muster drill that have changed since 2019 that you should be aware of that have not gone back to quote-unquote normal, or at least it's the new normal. I don't know, whichever you want to pick from. Number one is your check-in time. So before COVID-19, there are plenty of videos here on this channel in which I would tell you, that check-in time you get, you can ignore that. Well, not the case at this point. Royal Caribbean is still requiring that guests get a check-in time, and they are enforcing it, at least to some extent. when you get to the cruise terminal on embarkation day, somebody's going to ask you, what time is your check-in for? And if you're there much earlier than the time, well, then you might be asked to stand by and wait for other people to go first. Now, the exact situation in which how much time you'll be asked to go really depends. And certainly, these check-in windows are meant to help control the amount of people in the cruise terminal. I think initially, it was meant to really control, social distancing and making sure there just weren't too many bodies inside the cruise terminal. Nowadays, I think it's just about spacing things out and ensuring there just aren't log jams and lots of people there. Now, if you show up like hours early for your check-in time, will they let you in? Maybe, maybe not. We've heard different stories from different people in terms of how much they're actually enforcing the check-in times. My advice is, number one, do your online check-in before the cruise. Get an early check-in time, or at least a check-in time you can make, whatever is more convenient for you, and then arrive at that time. That way, there's no real surprises. Could you show up earlier than that time and maybe get into the terminal? Maybe, but there's no guarantees. And certainly, I would hate for you to be standing outside, especially during the warmer months in a place like Florida or Galveston or Los Angeles, in which it can be really warm outside and no shade, and that wouldn't be too ideal. Now let's quickly talk about the Crown and Anchor Society, because there were changes to the Crown and Anchor Society benefits when cruising restarted, but a lot of that has changed. Some things have remained, and the ones that have remained, I think, are actually for the best. When cruising restarted, some benefits were removed temporarily, but a lot of them are back. These include the private departure lounge and continental breakfast for gold members and above in Crown and Anchor Society is back. Top tier events are back for platinum and above. The chef's choice gift for diamond and above is back. Personalized gift and amenity for diamond plus and above is back. And priority access to dedicated seating at the theater, ice shows, and aqua theater events for diamond plus and above is also back for those guests. The meal with an officer experience for guests who had 340 points and above is back. It's actually called Cheers with an Officer now, but that has returned. And some of the backstage tours are in the process of coming back. But one big change for Diamond members is that there's no longer the Diamond drink hour in the Diamond Lounge. Instead, you get drink vouchers, which are kind of like the drink package. Now you get actually 4 drink vouchers to use if you're Diamond, 5 Diamond Plus, or 6 if you're Pinnacle, every day of the cruise that you can use for any beverage, $14 or less in value anywhere around the ship, including the Diamond Lounge. You can use it at any other bar. It's kind of like having your own personal drink package. And this was originally made to reduce crowding in the Diamond Lounge for social distancing. But I got to tell you, this is one of the best changes in addition to the muster drill, because it's better because the variety of drinks you have now is much wider than you had before. I think the one Crown and Anchor benefit that has not returned that I would like to see back, partially because I'm a Diamond Plus member and it would greatly benefit me, and that is in the cruise terminal having specific lines for different Crown and Anchor statuses, especially when you're getting ready to board the ship. They're not grouping people by their Crown and Anchor status and then boarding them in higher status first and going forward. It doesn't quite work that way. It's just basically everybody goes in at once. Admittedly, this is not the end of the world, but it is a benefit that I liked because, hey, it was nice to have that while I was a Diamond member and now a Diamond Plus member. So that has not returned. I'm not sure if that one will come back or not. But that's still one change that you should be aware of. The other really important protocol to know about is what happens if you get COVID-19 while on a cruise. Certainly, if you get COVID-19 before the cruise, there are policies in place still to allow for a refund. If you booked your cruise on or after August 8th, 2022, you'll get a 100% cruise fare refund for you and your traveling party if any of you test positive for COVID-19 within 10 days prior to the cruise or at the boarding terminal for cruises departing on or after April 30th, 2023. Now, if you test positive during your cruise, then at that point, Royal Caribbean will cover the cost of COVID-19 related medical treatment on board, and that is about it. Now, in terms of what happens to you if you test positive on your cruise, it still appears that Royal Caribbean will move you to a quarantine cabin for the remainder of your sailing. But since the policy isn't spelled out online, it's something that just occurs on board the ships, we're reliant on people to report back, but it still appears that policy is still in place. Really and truly, when you talk about is Royal Caribbean back to normal, so to speak, or how back to normal it is compared to 2019, I really do believe it's about as close as it's ever gotten since the cruising restarted in 2021. Most of the onboard experience, from when you get on board the ship until you get off the ship, is pretty much like it was at this point back before the whole cruise industry shut down. I think most of the situations, most of the protocols you're going to encounter are fairly reminiscent of what it used to be like. Whether you're looking at dining, activities on board, just walking around the ship, the protocols are pretty much normal. Whether it's Adventure Ocean, which is back to no more reservations and nothing requiring in terms of limited capacity there. Truly, there might be 1 or 2 activities that I can't think off the top of my head that have not returned quite yet, but pretty much everything there is back. And Royal Caribbean really wants to make its cruise experience no different than any other land-based vacation option. Nothing is risk-free in the world, whether it's a cruise or any other form of leisure travel. But the world has changed. The virus is not nearly as deadly as it was in 2020. Vaccinations and treatments for COVID-19 are far more prevalent today than they were before. And as a result, I think society in general has moved on past COVID-19. And while it is still an issue out there are always going to be health concerns you should be aware of. But going on a cruise today, in terms of the onboard experience, is a lot like it used to be in 2019. I think a lot of the changes that Royal Caribbean has made as a result of the cruise industry shutdown that happened in 2020 is actually better today in terms of some of the things like muster drill, the ventilation on board, some of the changes to Crown and Anchor Society. I actually like it a lot better. Let me know in the comments below if you've been on a cruise recently. I'm talking in the last month or two, what you think of the experience and how close it is to normal. And is there anything else that's left that you want to see come back in terms of the cruise experience that has not yet returned or is the same as it was in 2019? Looking forward to seeing your civil and well thought out comments in the comment section below. While you're down there, hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications. That way YouTube lets you know when we have a brand new video to share. This has been Matt from RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com, and we'll talk again real soon.